is going to be led by Chap.
Start in verse 6. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. We need somebody, and situations my Father may not allow. Give us the grace. We know that we can lean on you. We thank you for path straight in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Of our global participants from various embassies in various states, Office of the Public Service in the Northwest, and from various spheres of government, including the local sphere. Also appreciate academics present here, as well as the students in the Northwest University. Moral Regeneration Movement, led by Faram Kachwa, present here. I'm going to allow Rally Sibakwele, as the convener in the Northwest Province, to come and welcome and also outline the purpose of this event. Rally Siba.
Thank you, Program Director, for allowing us this opportunity on behalf of the Moral Regeneration Movement to appreciate that today we have gathered here in order that we reflect on a global icon, his contribution to humanity, as well as his proud legacy that he has left us to celebrate. So indeed, as the world celebrates Nelson Mandela Month, we as the Moral Regeneration Movement in the Northwest are particularly humbled that when we approached Bismarck Chobeka, an intellectual giant, a son of the soil, from the Northwest itself. So we're extremely. So on this score, Program Director, I am quite honored to, on behalf of the Moral Regeneration, also host this particular event on behalf of the Northwest Moral Regeneration Interim Committee. We are also having the honor to have the chairperson of the Moral Regeneration, Father Smangaliso Mukachwa, being part of the panelists together with Professor Paho from the Northwest University. So thank you.
Wasting any time, I'm going to call upon Professor Kidibone Paho to come and introduce the next speaker. This Professor.
The easiest of everyone here, just to introduce our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Bismarck Chobeka. Professor Bismarck Chobeka currently serves as the Vice Chancellor of the Northwest University, South Africa, formerly the CEO of the National Nuclear Regulator, and over the past 2 decades, of experience in nuclear sciences and engineering. He began his career at Eskom Enterprises, progressing through roles such as senior physicist and chief nuclear engineering analyst. And that was before becoming a nuclear engineer at the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA Council, the member of the International Nuclear Safety Advisory Group, the chairman of the Regulatory Cooperation Forum under IAEA, also president of the 6th and Radioactive Waste Management. Professor Chobeka is also an extraordinary professor at the Center for Applied Radiation Science and Technology and an extraordinary professor of nuclear engineering at Northwest University. He is also chairperson of the Nuclear Missile and Dual Use Committee of the Council for Non-Proliferation for Nuclear and Biological Weapons of the South African government and the chairperson of the Funding Strategy Group of Universities South Africa, USAF, a body comprising all 26 public universities in South Africa. Prof. Chobeka holds multiple degrees, including a PhD in nuclear engineering from Pennsylvania University, State University. Also, ladies and gentlemen, he received the French Republic recently awarded him the nuclear, ladies and gentlemen, my Vice Chancellor, Professor Chobeka.
Speaker, Medes Bomohono, Father Smangalishwa Mkachwa, the chairperson of the Moral Regeneration Movement, executive mayors and mayors of the Northwest Province municipalities that are present today, leaders of all political parties, faith-based organizations, trade unions and civil society, members of the diplomatic corps, HODs and CEOs of our public entities, panel members, members of the media community, members, esteemed guests, warm greetings from the Northwest University. Honorable Speaker, we are all familiar with the African philosophy of Ubuntu, through which, as human beings and as Africans, we express and demonstrate our sense of compassion, empathy, care and kindness, dignity, reciprocity, collegiality, generosity, and interconnectedness. It is this spirit of Ubuntu that shaped many African leaders and nations to seek freedom and justice. I truly believe that many of those who fought for freedom in our continent and elsewhere were really committed to the advancement and prosperity of their nation. Prosperity that we have somehow in some ways the foundational principles of Ubuntu. And by implication, our country and communities we have betrayed. Those who do not agree with me would not appreciate the need for the moral regeneration movement and its objectives. We must first accept that there is something wrong for us to seek sustainable solutions that can take our country forward. Therefore, I am glad and say that we are individually and collectively confronting the unethical behavior that negates the fundamental principles of the national democratic revolution, the theme of this event. today. Madam Speaker, Program Director, those who are inquisitive about our country's history would know that the National Democratic Revolution was aimed at dismantling all remnants of colonialism and establish a forward-looking, unified, democratic, and non-racial nation with a strong emphasis on liberating the previously marginalized. This strategy was developed to ensure that the key elements essential to improving the lives of South Africans are prioritized accordingly. These include economic development and transformation, land redistribution, enhancing living standards, and promoting national unity. The seventh administration of our country would do well to embrace these to build a democratic state characterized by popular control and a robust economy that benefits all South Africans, particularly those who have been historically disadvantaged. To achieve the objectives of the National Democratic Revolution, therefore, it is essential for us to be service-oriented and growth-driven. It is also important that we have policies and approaches that ensure that our actions are centered around the needs and the well-being of communities, cultivating a culture of trust and engagement between the government and its citizens. Madam Speaker, honorable members, esteemed guests and friends, we need to reflect on the current state of governance in our country and ask ourselves key questions. Those key questions include, among others, what progress have we made towards the achievement of a truly democratic and non-racial country that is responsive to the needs and aspirations of all its citizens? Secondly, what is to be done? What still needs to be done to achieve the spirit and the promise outlined in the National Democratic Revolution and the Constitution of our country? To answer these and other questions, we must turn to the spirit and the legacy of Nelson Mandela, our founding father, who, after serving as a uniting force for the oppressed masses during apartheid, came out of prison to steer the ship in the volatile and uncharted waters during the first administration, the Government of National Unity in 1994. There is no doubt that Tata Mandela remains a towering icon and a guide on a global scale. His contributions to the struggle against the most intense and institutionalized system of its time, the apartheid South Africa, was about the freedoms and democratic society that is predominantly right. The long walk to freedom. President Mandela recounts moments of his support to Albert Luthuli, the ANC president at that time, who had initiated a non-violent passive resistance against apartheid in 1952. This was also after Luthuli was stripped off of his government benefits as a chief when he refused to renounce his membership of the ANC and the support of the Defiance campaign. It is through this kind of political developments in South Africa that shaped and reinforced President Mandela's perspectives regarding injustices that were meted out to his own people. It is also within this purview of the liberation struggle, torture, imprisonment, and dehumanizing treatment of blacks in general, and that the fight against injustice was also intensified. This was done in ways that allowed the international community to eventually declare apartheid as a crime against humanity in 1966 through the United Nations General Assembly's resolution. Madam Speaker, we know that the leadership acumen of President Mandela and his comrades eventually led to the liberation and political freedom of South Africa. The adoption of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa in 1996, the Constitutional Assembly became momentous. By the Constitutional Assembly became momentous in every respect. This moment ushered in the Bill of Rights that sought to restore the humanity of South Africans, irrespective of their creed, religion, race, and gender, among others. The international community and many South Africans, if not all of us at that time, were excited and optimistic about the future of South Africa. South Africans anticipated a responsive government and a public service that would understand their circumstances and needs. Indeed, the government initiated progressive interventions such as the Reconstruction and the Development Plan to address poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Legislation and policies were introduced to protect workers and companies, and the public service adopted service-oriented concepts such as the Batupili principles. Madam Speaker, it was all hands on deck towards creating a developmental and capable state until the pendulum swung. And we are where we are today in terms of our leadership core in both private and public sectors. Today, let us focus on the public sector. Madam Speaker, honorable members and esteemed guests, we must remember that the role of public administration remains a catalyst for a developmental state. Without state capacity, a developmental state remains an elusive dream. While these kinds of lectures and discourses are critical in sharpening our minds to think deeply about our own values and the role of public institutions, we also need to create innovative programs that would facilitate and restore hope in the government. Northwest University's doors are open for meaningful partnerships and could bring positive changes to communities in the Northwest Province and beyond. As you would know, we have several initiatives and projects across our various faculties in the national departments, provinces, and indeed across our municipalities. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, provincial and local government structures are modeled within a decentralized notion. This is imperative in the configuration of our state architecture because it allows government to deal with easily received attention in cases where we only have a national government or national departments. Despite this, we notice from the Auditor General's report of 2022-23 that 263 material irregularities and violations, which amounted to around 5.9 billion in fruitless and wasteful expenditure nationally, were recorded. Many of these violations are on procurement and payments, resource management, and revenue management areas, among others. For national and provincial audit outcomes, although there were reported improvements, it is still clear that sticking issues of bad payment practices, rendered services with no value for money, unfair procurement processes, and neglected maintenance are still seriously featured in our government performance. The public service plays a crucial role in providing essential services such as health, education, housing, safety and security, and social services to our communities. It is therefore crucial that people who lead and work in the public service embrace and demonstrate ethical, caring, and servant leadership. Madam, one of the sources I consulted with while preparing to deliver this lecture is the Auditor General's consolidated report on the national and provincial audit outcomes for 2022-23. This report reveals various challenges and shortcomings in financial management within our province, which are related to issues such as irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and non-compliance with supply chain management processes. These findings are an indication that there is a lack of effective financial controls and oversight, which leads to financial mismanagement and inefficiencies in the use of public funds. The report also points out concerns regarding sustainability of service delivery and the overall financial health of the province. In analyzing the report on Northwest Province in particular, it is evident that there is a need for enhanced accountability and transparency in financial management practices in our province. The prevalence of these wasteful and irregular expenditures suggests weaknesses in financial governance and oversight mechanisms, which can undermine public trust and confidence in government. Evidently, surveys have shown over and over that people have lost faith in government. This calls for our interventions from all directions, including the moral regeneration movement. Addressing these issues requires a concerted effort and an all-hands-on-deck approach from all of us. Honorable Premier, the Noordwes-Universiteit stands ready again to strengthen this relationship with the provincial government for collaborative projects to address some of these problems. We can never turn a blind eye on the importance of ethics in public services, as these are crucial for ensuring accountability, transparency, integrity within government institutions, particularly in the South African context, where corruption and misconduct have been prevalent over the years. The 2017 OECD legal instrument document, which includes the recommendation of the Council on improving ethical conduct in public service, including principles for managing ethics in the public service, emphasizes the critical role of promoting ethics in public service to prevent corruption and to ensure good governance. It highlights the significance of establishing and upholding ethical standards within government and its institutions to create a culture of transparency, accountability, and integrity. This document clearly indicates that if countries are to implement these principles and guidelines, systems that serve the best interest of their citizens must be in place. The document calls for effective mechanism to monitor and enforce ethical standards within government institutions, which is crucial for building a transparent and accountable public service sector. Madam Speaker, honorable members, I am certain that we do not want to promote lip service and empty promises regarding service excellence. We must demonstrate our resolve through actions in servicing the people of the Northwest Province and South Africa across the board. You will agree with me that all the problems and challenges that we face in our public service will not be resolved on their own, but they call for action. The public service can collaborate with higher education institutions, such as ours, and other relevant institutions, including the South African Ethics Institute, to have tailor-made workshops and training programs and awareness campaigns for public servants, which are aimed at promoting and harnessing a culture of ethics and integrity among government officials. Not that such programs do not exist, Madam Speaker. Such programs exist, such campaigns exist, but corruption and unethical behavior has become endemic and has instead become a culture in our society. A cancerous culture, dare I say. It is important that we deliberately roll out these programs more and more to inculcate and promote an ethical culture as part of the capacitation and professionalization of the public sector. And this must find traction in provinces and municipalities for us to achieve the objectives of the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan highlights the chronic problems that face our economy, our economic prospects, and directs that we need a capable state to equip us to deal with problems in education, health in our country. Such a capable state can never come into being as long as our public servants see being employed in the public sector as a vehicle to access unscrupulous deals from our taxpayers' money. Madam Speaker, honorable members, esteemed guests and friends, our individual and collective roles within the broader public sector require a firm resolve. Let us emulate Tata Mandela and embody values that are enshrined in Chapter 10 of our Constitution, Chapter 7 of the Municipal System Act 32 of 2000, and similar legislations that speak about putting our people first in the real sense of the word. These pieces of legislation address public administration basic values and principles that need to be espoused by every public service official on and off duty. We must be people-centered for us to respond effectively and efficiently to the imperatives outlined in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. For instance, we can work towards the SDG 1 to ensure that there is no poverty by enhancing agricultural production, implementing social protection systems, and ensuring equitable economic resources, and SDG 3 on good health and well-being by providing access to quality healthcare services and reducing maternal mortality. We can further promote SDG 4, quality education, through inclusive and equitable education initiative, and SDG 5 on gender equality by ending discrimination and ensuring women's participation in leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, for us as a nation, this is where cultural values such as Ubuntu need to be weaved into government policy implementation mechanics to ensure that public services are prioritized for citizens instead of just benefiting business and the political elites in our society. In his book, Conversations with Myself, President Mandela says that, quote, "It is always a great moment when I listen to an expert on true history, culture, legends, and traditions. We used to pester men like Mueli Skota, Silope Tema, Chief Albert Litule, Professor Z.K. Matthews, Moses Kotani, J.B. Marx, and the amount of knowledge they had on African history was impressive," close quote. Dani Nabudere, the recently departed eminent Ugandan academic, who reinforces this view in his book, Chimafeje, scholar, activist, he states, I quote, "Mafeje has argued that in talking about the issue of culture and development, the underlying thesis is that without relying on their own on their own culture, Africans cannot hope to develop, close quote. Mandela has clearly demonstrated that our cultural values can be infused in our public documents for our jurisprudence and adoption by our public institution. Madam Speaker, in this regard, I am by no means trying to advocate for doing away with Roman dash law, but I'm just saying that we can infuse our cultural values in our own jurisprudence and in our own public institutions. Though we usually decide to ignore this at our own societal peril. So, Madam Speaker, after all is said and done about people-centeredness and service delivery in our province and country, we may have to pause and ask, what would Mandela say about our posture towards service delivery to our communities? Secondly, what should characterize a new cadre of public servants in South Africa today? Thirdly, how can we ensure and how can we enhance our recruitment and appointment processes to ensure meritocracy while addressing the imbalances of the past in our public service? Fourthly, is it ethical for us as public servants to receive and accept our monthly salaries and bonuses while the people we claim to serve do not receive services on a daily basis, in some cases, sleep hungry and unsheltered? Fifthly, public sector employees to unscrupulously do business with the state. When do we bring, especially those that have got the lock and key to the state resources? And lastly, how can we ensure that our performance management systems rewards people who deliver on their mandate and weed out the uncaring, unethical, and the lazy ones? This is a challenge not to the leadership of the state alone. It is also a challenge I would like to put on the table for the trade union movement. Whilst trade union movements were a breath of fresh air in the new democratic era to protect and promote workers' rights, they accordingly also need to be part of a working public service. That they can do by keeping their own members honest. And part of keeping your own members honest is in ensuring that the culture of impunity, the culture of laziness, the culture of abscondence is contrary to the theme of this lecture today. It is contrary to the Ubuntu principle that Ubaba Mandela had brought to bear before he departed. Well, Madam Speaker, honored members, we will regrettably not know exactly what Mandela would have said about the problems and challenges facing us today. But we can remember his words and belief that the real leaders, freedom of their people, and a fundamental concern for others would go a long way in making the world the better place we so passionately dreamt of, close quote. By doing that, we would be practicing Ubuntu, our municipalities, and indeed for the people of our country. Enkosi, ngiyabonga, ngiyaleboga, bayatanki.
Thank you, Prof. Jobeka. Indeed, we come from far as the Africans. With that said, I'm going to now open the floor. But before that, I will then constitute a team of panelists. And then I will open the floor to engage on the speech delivered by Prof. And then from there, I will allow the Prof now to give his closing remarks immediately after the engagement from everyone, including the participants online. Are we ready, Reverend Vambo? Reverend Vambo, the platform is yours. Okay. Now let me take over from that item. Our panelists are going to be Fathers Mangalisam Kachwa, and then we will have also Professor Kidibone Paho. Then we will include Reverend Tamsanga Vambo. Those will be our panelists. I will now allow hands from the floor, as well as the engagement also from the virtual platform to engage the speech delivered by Professor Bismarck. Where's the roving mic?
No, thanks, and let me welcome the address by Prof. Bismarck Jobek. I think Africa and African nations fail to seize the moment or to learn from number of books that were written before the liberation. South Africa, I think, is the last country in Africa to be in democracy or to achieve freedom or liberation. There is a book here by Chinua Achebe, Man of the People, a number of books that were written. But one that comes to my mind and that I greatly like is the one he wrote in 1983, titled The Troubles of Nigeria, which could have been Troubles with Africa, where he simply says, the troubles with Nigeria are simply and squarely the fail of leadership. Now he says that the leadership, the inability of its leaders to rise to the responsibility and to challenge of personal examples which are a hallmark of a true leadership. Now these are the things that will negate the fundamental principles of the National Democratic Revolution. Because these are just to reverse what could have been freedom for the people, Africans, we are saying Africans in general and blacks in particular, of which we have not even achieved it. Are we free? Are we really in the liberation? Because Chinua Achebe in this book speaks about corruption, indiscipline, lack of patriotism, illiteracy, a number of things, which are not going to be what the National Democratic Revolution seek to achieve in South Africa. Now, my take is that for us to achieve the fundamental principles of national democratic revolution, we need two values in leaders. We need leaders with love for the people. You must be able to love the people that you are leading, to love even your country. You can't put your hands in a cookie jar if you love your people. You can't be saying the millions are missing, just missing if you really love the people. Because that is the money that is supposed to be improving the lives of the people that you are leading. That's supposed to be the money that is going to bring services to the people. You cannot be happy when you are a mayor or you are a public figure and the community always protests that there is no water. The community protests that there are no services to them, and whereas millions are missing because of corruption. What are we doing as leaders? You are leading a department, you are a political head, but here is an official in supply chain who are living more luxurious lives, more than their salaries. What is the legacy that you are leaving behind? I think we need people who have love for the country and love for the people. Subsequently to that, I think we need servant leadership. You must be a servant for you to be a leader, because you'll understand what is to be done in that particular role. You can have as many policies that are sound. You can have as many things that are very progressive. The National Development Plan, the RDP, and everything. But if you don't have servant leadership to drive those policies through, you will never achieve anything. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we take the second speaker?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. My name is Orapele Matsidiso. I welcome, of course, the address by Prof. Bismarck. I'm going to be short, but I want to start first and foremost maybe with what Prof said. I think he left us with a question that what will Nelson Mandela say with the state of affairs our state of affairs as a country. I want to speculate that perhaps President Nelson Mandela could have said, you are in this state because in 1997, not far from where we are, in Mafikeng, when he was giving a political report to his movement, the African National Congress, he said part of what we need to do is to deal with the negative tendencies within the movement. And he referred that negative tendencies to the careerists within the movement who see the position of being in leadership and government and deployed in government as a way to get closer to the public pairs for their personal gratification. I think if I was to speculate, I would say he said you did not confront that particular negative tendency. That is why maybe we are where we are today. The second thing is that I think as a country and generally as a continent, our challenge remains being leader-centric in approach to certain issues. When a particular leader comes, when he lives with that particular idea, because we are not building a people-to-people kind of relations or programs that are, of course, embedded in our people. If we can deal with that leader-centric approach, you see, Father Mangalishwa is leading this moral regeneration. If he leaves, he might be living with some ideas because we are more of a bedroom engagement than going to the grassroots. And the grassroots is where leaders, of course, pool of leaders are, of course, elected or appointed, so on and so forth. The last point that I want to make is that 12 years later, after we have adopted the National Development Plan, particularly Chapter 14, when you read Chapter 14 of the National Development Plan says, we're supposed to have a national dialogue as a country to discuss the type of leadership we give to the society at all spectrum, be it at the church, civil society, public sector, and all everywhere. 12 years later, we have not entered that dialogue. Perhaps what the current government of national unity says is going to call a national dialogue. Perhaps it must also be encapsulated. We need to debate what type of leadership do we give to the society. The second point that I want to make, of course, Prof, I think you made a point, but you keep on referring to public servants alone. There's a collaboration between public servants and public representatives. That is why we see ourselves where we are. There is a lack of accountability, as chapter 14 says. There's lack of accountability and confronting corruption. I will make a practical example. Instead of us as a country confronting people who are committing corruptions, we rather opt to review policies and so on and so forth. There's a public procurement bill that has, of course, 2023, it was put in public for comments. But when you check it, there's a proposal that there's going to be an appointment of a chief procurement officer who's going to be an overall player in terms of procurement. We are not addressing the problem. We are, of course, addressing the effects. We need to deal with that particular route. We speak about building a capable state, a capable and developmental state. Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan is clear on what has to happen. And part of the problem that it speaks about is that there's a serious political interference in appointing competent people. Can we say 10, 12 years later since we adopted National Development Plan, has ever been any intervention with regard to that? Continuation of appointing incapable people, it happens unabated. And that is a problem. I think that when we want to confront unethical behavior, we need to deal with that. We are in the process of professionalizing. There's a process, 2014 document came, professionalizing of public service. We can professionalize public service, but that professionalization will remain in the paper because part of professionalization is appointing competent people. Many institutions of government, you can go and check, many of them is either they do not have or implement the employment equity plan. Something that we said it must address the inequality. Many countries in Africa today, research has proven, are lagging behind in terms of implementing sustainable development goals precisely because we don't have a clear social policy. We need to have a social policy that will, of course, among other things, focus on developing our people. Africa as a continent in 2050 could have surpassed many continents in the world in terms of having youthful continent. But are we investing in ensuring that those young people are trained properly so that, because young people, if majority of them are not trained, are not so developed, they can either be a curse or blessings to the continent. So we need to start now. Otherwise, if we don't do that, Kenya is a living reality. Thank you very much.
Masidiso, do we have Uziamera? All right. Do we have another hand?
Let me greet Father Smangaliso Mkachwa. I met him in 2006 when I started becoming active in the issues of moral regeneration. But I'm disappointed with the gathering in terms of the setting up of chairs vis-a-vis the warm bodies where we are. Lina laka o kenna tshepo mokorwane. I'm not going to dwell much on the lecture itself. I'm just going to leave the house with few words. I would start by the theme that says charity begins at home. I had my brother speaking about Africa. He took it at higher level, and then my brother spoke about governance and policies. I'm going to face this thing at home. We are dilapidating at home. Kids are being raised by cell phones and televisions and social media. And then the family is disintegrating. Morality becomes the last thing on the agenda. What many people are looking for is the money, survival of the fittest. And then we end up becoming surprised to see everyone in the public service, at churches. Everyone wants to be rich. Everyone wants to eat. And then we end up criticizing on the basis that I'm outside. Immediately when I get inside, I become part of the furniture. I become part of those who eat because it's my time to eat. Now, Kilewane fella, I would say, we are approaching the time where people, they will throw stones at you when you start mentioning Nelson Mandela. Said this, Nelson Mandela says this to them, because people are going home or going to bed hungry. People are survivalists. People want to survive. That's what is key. Now, my proposal to the House is that let's look at fundamental developmental things at basic level, at home, at community level, whereby we build young people that are responsible citizens, that they will know that their role is to be responsible starting from home into community. Now, moral regeneration as a movement, it should be bigger than the church. It should be bigger than a responsibility of the church. It must be a responsibility of every human being, whereby we say it takes a child, it takes a village to raise a child. Ngwana ke sijo wa tlhakanelwa, and then we deal with the basics of the basics. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you have another one?
Thank you, Program Director. I think we need to take cognizance of what the Prof has raised in his very important lecture. I think when we decided that we are looking at a person of his caliber, we knew that he will live up or lift up those values that Nelson Mandela lived for, which are lost to us as society. And a lot still must be done. The period of pointing fingers does not help. But where we are, we need to say boldly that we cannot allow our country to go on a downward spiral while we are watching and applauding. It is time for us to take action. Moral regeneration speaks of uniting in action in order to achieve or reclaim the values that Dr. Nelson Mandela lived for. And the Charter of Positive Values that the moral regeneration is promoting is a starting point. And we appreciate what the Prof said, that He's looking at deepening the relationship with civil society and in particular with the moral generation. And we welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am going now to allow our panelists to react to what has been delivered by Professor Bismarck, and as well as what has been, what we have received from our audience and our participants. I will only give 7 minutes each. I think that's a lot. 5 minutes each per panelist, just to react. I will begin from, should I start from the left? Professor Pajo.
Thank you, Program Director. I think this is an important conversation, in my view, that we come and reflect as a society around issues that we believe are important at this point in time. And so coining the notion of Ubuntu into the moral regeneration spectrum and talking about how we should be using our public institutions to provide sustainable services to the society says that we are actually doing what we say we want to do. So this conversation is quite necessary, and it's taking place as we are here. So what the Vice Chancellor was saying as well is that we are members of the society, and it is not just a question of us as individuals, but we also need to put together our collective responsibilities. And our collective responsibilities mean, in this case, for example, that you need to have the private sector, you need to have the civil society, like the moral regeneration movement, you need to have universities, you need to have public institutions to come on board and share ideas on how best we can collaborate in order to move our country forward. So the point there is any developmental trajectory for us as South Africans, as a nation, will mean that we need to restore, we need to support, we need to build strong public institutions. There is no country in the world that is considered developing or progressing without strong public institutions. So it should be our care, and this is partly, you listen to the Vice Chancellor referring to some of the reports from the Chapter 9 institutions like the Auditor General, because this is in a way to reflect on the strength of our public institutions. So when he says that our public institutions are bleeding resources, these resources are diverted. The material findings from the Auditor Generals. So this is, in my view, one of the areas where moral regeneration movements and other civil society should actually be alive to taking up these issues, even with members of parliament and provincial legislatures during these debates after the reports are published, to come and say, we want to know what are the interventions going forward? Because if we just debate them in this kind of platforms, but we don't make follow-up substantively, then it is just one step into actually addressing the problem. But the other last point for me, Program Director, is that we need to be alive to our policies. And I was very happy with the reactions from the floor when colleagues are referring to documents such as national development plans, such as the sustainable development goals of the United Nations, such as the AU Agenda 2063. So we need to know the grand plan if we are really to meaningfully contribute in the notion of Ubuntu policy development and our developmental trajectory as a society. Thank you.
Very much. Reverend?
Thank you very much, Program Director. Thank you very much. Oh, no. Thank you very much, Program Director. Two things I need to talk about. I've noted from the presentation of Professor Chobeka, one of the things that he mentioned was the question of accountability, which is very, very critical. Although I came late, but the last point that he made, we are suffering from something in South Africa. I think it is easy for us to pronounce on issues, but one of the things that we are lacking is follow-up and ensuring that whatever we are engaging around or whatever we spoke about is followed up. We have been talking about corruption, accountability, but nobody is following up all these issues. And that's why they are left. And there's a tendency in this country, when there is a crisis, we think summits and engagements will bring solutions. But even though we come up with proposals, ideas on how to tackle these issues, it becomes just got enough policies in this country that are addressing these issues, but nothing is happening that is tangible practically. So the question of accountability, whether from the public service or from the private sector and whoever is involved, it's very, very critical and it needs to be addressed. My other point is the issue of people who want to benefit without necessarily doing anything. I'm talking about a culture of materialism. In this country, we've got a crisis, and we have to note, this crisis often not, we point fingers at public representatives and public servants. And they are not the only people who are a problem. Now we know that religious institutions and everybody in society, we are all suffering from the culture of materialism. Everybody wants to accumulate, and accumulate even without making any contribution. This quick reach mindset is now embedded in the coming generations. And we are creating a society that is saying, for you to become successful, you must take a shortcut. And the shortcuts are the ones that are bringing more problems in this country. We've got people who say one thing in terms of how they pronounce themselves, but who are doing the opposite on the other hand. So we have to deal with this kind of culture. And I believe that organizations like MRM have got a contribution to make in trying to shape how people look at values. Because if we do not address the question of values, then whatever we do will not come to pass. We will still be complaining about these issues, raising these issues, as if they are just meant to be discussed, but nothing tends to happen. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ref. Father Mkatra. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Oh, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to start off by apologizing for arriving late, and there were unfortunately reasons beyond our control. And I remember my German missionaries who brought me up, they were very strict on punctuality. And they would say, if the meeting is starting at 10, if you are late, arrive at 10 to 10. Now, I didn't win today, but we usually win. Secondly, he said, once you arrive in that meeting, don't open your mouth, because what you are going to say, probably people have already spoken about it. Out of respect for the people, don't, just keep your mouth shut. Now, Reverend Huile has said, has given me the permission at least to open my mouth even just for a few minutes. Now, I'm sorry that I didn't really get the full thrust of the, I'm sure, excellent address that was delivered by, what's his name, very interesting
Professor
name.
Bismarck.
Bismarck Jobeka. Yeah. And it's very interesting for me because I've just finished reading a book called The Curse of Berlin. And Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck, appears very, I'm sure you have read it, appears there very, very, very prominently and so on. Now, due to lack of time, I'll just try to highlight one or 2 points. The first one is that some of you may or may not remember that after the launch of the moral generation movement in 2002, soon after that, I think probably it was even almost a year after that, we established a chapter or a provincial chapter of MRM in this province. It was led by him. He can, bear me out. What was very interesting about that situation was that, one, Popo Mlifi was then the premier. We had a discussion with him. Then he said, Smangalis, I don't want you to waste my time. According to the resolution in Pretoria, is that my function as the head of a province is to provide support to you, not to run MRM. MRM has its own identity, its own authority, its own agenda, and so on. But because government all over the country is regarded as a sector, and therefore it's a very important partner, but partner, not the one that then runs the organization. And he was able to get all the municipalities actively involved. He was actually able to establish very important structures to ensure the continuity and the strength of the moral generation movement. And we never had a problem. And Popo also understood that maybe even before that was actually initiated, he also understood that there is a government program. It's just called moral regeneration. That's why the deputy president from time to time has to answer questions in parliament. What has moral regeneration done? How successful has it been, and all the rest of it, and so on. Now, regrettably, there's been a confusion between that government program initiated by government and run by government is different from the moral regeneration movement. The movement encompasses all sectors of communities and so on. That is really the difference. All what the MRM gets from government is partnership, which is valued very much and so on, and usually take the form of a financial contribution and so on. Even though, as you know, this is no secret, there's been lots of problems here with regard to this misunderstanding and so on. But I'm very glad to say that now the newly established interim structure of MRM headed by Pastor Ekwele, is alive to that and is trying to rectify that situation because it causes lots of problems. Because some people, for example, have said, yeah, this MRM has not been invited because it's just a government tool. This MRM has not been successful because it's married to that particular political party and so on and so on. Which, of course, you and I will smile at this one because this is not really true. But those are the perceptions of people, which therefore means if government is messing up, the public image of MRM is tarnished. Then you can't confidently approach people and engage them on issues of morality. So that's why I'm here, therefore, to say thank you very much for that contribution as a province, and I sincerely hope not only as a province, but more specifically as this institution of higher learning, which Professor Jobeka is heading. We're very proud of your record, and we're hopeful that we'll actually be able to strengthen a relationship which started a number of years ago. Some of you will remember. We had interaction with students here, with members of faculty. We had interaction. We even held, I remember, was it a workshop and so on, where some journalists and other people met here to engage on issues. Now, I'm not so sure whether that marriage, how far that marriage is. I know there is some marriage, marriage with the Department of, I think Department of Social Development or something like that, and so on and so on. But because we are in this space, the role that institutions of higher learning can play, it's immense. Those are the people who produce knowledge, who do quality research. And those are the people who are not saying, MRM, you must pay for this and so on and so on. They also have certain resources that they have, and they might want to continue sharing with us in the best interest of moral generation in this province. Just a word about servanthood. As we were coming here, I related a story to him of President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. A number of years ago, when I was the president of the United Cities and Local Governments of Africa, I visited heads of states, African heads of states, and so to drum up support for a program that we wanted to initiate in Ethiopia. So one day I go to, I was from Cote d'Ivoire, so I go to this place, and the mayor happened to be a very close friend of the president, and he was also serving on my structure. So I get there, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm on this mission. So he said, oh, by the way, the president today is at home. He's not traveling anywhere. Would you like to see him? Well, of course, immediately, being typical South African and also having been in government, protocol, yeah, but protocol demands that we should do it this way. So, I understand that, but if, for instance, he says he can see us for half an hour, would you mind? Of course I would welcome them. Picks up the telephone, speaks in a language I didn't understand, of course, but the upshot of that conversation was that, no, he will give us 30 minutes. We went there, he gave us more than 2 hours. And we're discussing issues that had a lot to do with the moral regeneration and reconstruction of Africa as a whole, because I think we are in trouble with regard to that. But what is important about that meeting, we spoke a lot about their own struggle with support for South Africa and so on. But what was very significant was that 2 months later, 2 years later, when I visited Kigali, I looked for this friend of mine who was very close to the president. And they said, no, he was not available. I couldn't see him. And I insisted that, we're so close friends that I really wanted to see him, just to say hello. So to cut a long story short, they said to him, well, it's going to be difficult for you to see him because he is in prison. So I said, well, in prison, you know who I mean? Yes. They say, the police went to see the president with a big file. Said, Mr. President, please read this. It's meant for your eyes only, but these are our findings. That close friend of yours, the minister, has been found with his hand in the cookie jar, very deep in the cookie jar, even now, that time he was minister. And so he says to them, he's immediately responsible, I haven't read this, but what's your problem? You know your job is to ensure that whoever breaks the law, you investigate, and if you're satisfied, you have that, you make sure that person is charged and convicted if found guilty. So that's why, it's just to give you an example that he was the kind of president, every Monday, I think he still continues, he wears his overalls. Together with the people, they clean. That's why Kigali is one of the cleanest cities in the world. He himself lives by, example. Secondly, if you are corrupt, you must know you are doomed already even before you are caught. It doesn't play at all. And therefore, what I'm therefore saying, Chair, is that in this country, what is probably the biggest challenge now is no longer even just to say, but what will this government do? Except that, of course, the government have accepted position of leadership of servanthood, and they are paid for it generously too. But I think what we probably need to do much more frequently is what you are doing today. As ordinary members of society, as academics, as business people, as young people, as organized formations and so on, to sit down to put your heads together. For example, some of the questions that you might want to ask is, for 30 years, we have been free. We still have, how to explain a situation where a small, tiny minority of white people still own more than 3/4 of the land? Black people that are supposed to be the owners of the land, they are tenants in different forms. How do you explain the situation that our system of government, great on paper and everything else and so on, but we have a problem of unemployment because the young people who are very ready and willing to do their best, they are not getting jobs. Why? But all those are questions you can ask among yourselves. Why are there so many daily murders, especially of black people, practically of black people, of women, and so on? How do you explain a situation where the quality, where you have, I don't know what percentage of obviously young black kids who cannot read for understanding? What? How do you explain that, even purely from the moral point of view? Because for me, this is not just a question of politics, it's a question of morality. To conclude, therefore, Pastor Khwele, I would like to also suggest that maybe one of the two projects that you'd find particularly interesting, maybe urgent, is one, the issue of the murder, daily murders of people, especially of women. The unemployment of young people, because that unemployment is a bomb waiting to explode, and we cannot afford that. How do you explain a situation where there's no accountability, where corruption has become almost part of our lives? If you are caught for corruption, shame, he was not clever enough, they caught him. Now, so the mindset and everything else is terribly wrong. And therefore, I would like once again to thank you for giving us the opportunity, and sincerely hope that what you are doing today is only the beginning or the revitalization of an initiative that we started years ago, which somehow had gone down at that. But thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Father Mkachwa. Let me also thank all members of the panel, Professor Pajo, Reverend Mvambo. Let me also thank all who have contributed from the audience. We greatly appreciate your outstanding submissions and participation. Just with highlights that the importance of instilling moral values from early stages of childhood, early stages of childhood. Some from the floor they have raised the sort of tiptoeing around confronting corruption by public representatives. Then what do we learn as leaders or public servants or South Africans and Africans from the great thinkers and like Chinua Achebe, as said from the floor? Yeah, those are some of the highlights that we have received from such our engagement. I'm now going to cross over to you, Professor Jobeka, for your closing comments. Yeah, Professor Bismarck.
Thank you very much, program director and our esteemed panelists for the inputs that they've made in response to my earlier talk. Also, thank you very much to the attendees from the floor on their responses and inputs. And just to touch on a few so that we close, I would like to start on on Mfundisi Unyawonhle Mkachwa, on the points he made. By the way, Reverend Mkachwa, Father, you speak of my name as that rabble-rouser from the German history. Now, I also would like to point out that I first encountered Father Mkachwa when he was the Deputy Minister of Education. There was no higher education at that time. It was just education. And I was a student in Mahikeng campus of the Noordwes-universiteit. At that time, it was the University of Northwest. And Premier Popo Molefe, a student protest that shut down campus. And the Vice Chancellor, Professor Malupe, ordered that the campus be shut down and students be evacuated. And so in the leadership of the students, we went to the Premier's office. And we said to Premier Molefe, we have students here that are supposed to go home and leave campus, and they have no place to sleep. And some of them are hungry, the cafeteria is closed, and they depend on bursaries. And the Premier says, so what do you want me to do? We said, well, you must order management to open campus and the residences in particular. He said to his PA, put Reverend Mkachwa on the line. Reverend Mkachwa was the Deputy Minister. And he put him on speaker. And he said, we have a situation here, comrade. What can be done? Because in terms of our law, our legislation, I have no control over higher education institutions. That's now the Premier. And so it can only be an instruction from you guys at national. And Reverend Kachwa said, who is the chairman of council there? And the chairman of council at the time was Reverend Tau. I don't know how many of you remember him. He sadly passed away at a very old age, actually. He was one of our long-standing members of council through generations. Reverend John Tau. So Professor Fadam Kachwa said, I need the number of Moruti Tau, and I will give him the instructions accordingly. And indeed, the following day campus was opened and management was open to the discussion with the SRC. So that is when, how far I have gone with Umfundis Nyawontle. So thank you very much for your input. I just want to pick on one of the points you've made, Father, on the issue of repetitive discussions in our society and no end to it. And you mentioned the issue of land ownership. Now, as institutions of higher learning, we try not to politic the national question, but we intend the table so that the politicians, when they implement, they have enough data. They make data-driven decisions. Now, one of the things that we know for a fact, and we have statistics to that, is that whereas a lot of land still lies in the hands of white ownership, the truth of the matter, which sometimes people don't want to stomach, is that there's a vast amount of land that is within government control. And then the question is, are we making use of that land? I listened to President Mbeki when he addresses the issue of land. And he says we must be careful to not confuse the issue of landlessness and the issue of urban migration. I think that is a very profound observation. Because I sit with young people, and among other things, the radical ones, and I ask them, so one of your gripes is land ownership. Tell me what you want to do with land. Because you see, if you go across the butte, a lot of land was given to the landless, historically dispossessed. It is now common knowledge that a lot of that land has lain unused and derelict. Now we need to have a clear plan when we talk of land, of what do we need land for? Do we need land to resettle our people in urban areas because they want to be closer to the economic heartbeat of the country? Or do we indeed need land to produce food for food security? I always give an example. In the far-flung areas, closer to the border of Botswana. When I was growing up there, Muruti, as a young boy, there was a gravel road that passes next to the vast plantation of corn, of maize meal, of millet. And my wife comes from the Eastern Cape. So when I drive along that gravel road, I give her this story all the time. You could stand here on the gravel road and look across the horizon. You would not see the end of the plantation where the maize plantation stops. This whole place, vast hectares, 6,000 hectares, was a place where every family was cultivating their own crops. And I grew up here. I did that with my own hands, with my tatomkhulu. Today, my eyes cannot look over 10 meters from the road and see anything because it is a bush. That land has not been dispossessed from us by white people. It is still our land. But we have become reluctant to work the land. So the question then is, really, if we need to redistribute land further, have we satisfied our land, ourselves, that the land that we currently have in our possession, including government land, is properly worked on? And only after that, only after honest questions, honest answers to that question, can we then say, let's redistribute further. Otherwise, I'm afraid, Mfundis, we will be putting more and more land in a situation where it becomes unused. So when we talk about land ownership, we need to hurry again to interrogate the issue of land use. It is, of course, immoral to drive across the Northwest Province and see all these huge swaths of farms owned by one person. And these farms, most of them not very heavily utilized, with just a few heads of cattle. We can't say that is contributing to our food security. So therefore, I find the land discussion sometimes very shallow, sometimes very convenient, and I think we need, as part of this moral regeneration movement, delve deeper and take politics aside from the issue of land and be data-driven in the submissions that we bring forward. And then there was an issue that Muruti Kwele raised on young people, harnessing the energy of the youth and channeling it to the right direction. And there was a warning there that says, if we do not give that attention as soon as possible, a member of the audience said there, we only have to look across East Africa in Kenya to see the consequences of that. And well, 2 days ago, I watched President Museveni giving a chilling warning to the youth of Uganda about the same thing. And they are saying, we want to march to parliament to protest about corruption. Nothing more. We're not saying we're not happy about you, Mr. President. But we're saying something must be done because corruption has become so endemic that it is a sore to everybody's eye. And the president said, you're playing with fire. He issued that chilling warning and said, don't play with fire. Now, those are things that we need to learn from as a government. That whilst we have all the good intentions with the National Development Plan, with all the programs that we have, we sit, Mfundis, with a number of unemployed youth full of energy. And the mistake that we continue to do is to go to rallies and make big declarations about employing 100,000 of these as police reserves, as what. As if that is a favor that is being done to young people. It is not a favor. It is like praising a fish on its swimming skills. We should not be gloating about those things. In fact, we should just report on those things on our annual performances to say we're able to create so many jobs. But to politic about it when in fact it still remains a ticking time bomb, I think it's very misplaced. There is so much to be done in the area of youth employment that we are also, as the university, taking up with municipalities in the province to say, let's try to place more students so that they get the requisite skills and work experience. I'm happy that the president declared that now we are going to scrape this 3-year job, the 3-year experience for entrance. Where will they get that experience? We need to more and more create opportunities for them to enter the private and the public sector without barriers, as long as they have, of course, meritorious requirements in their CVs, such as you must have passed this, you must have passed that. Because otherwise, we are creating a state with no capacity if we take all and sundry. But once we do that, we expose them to the opportunities. We need theory of them being usurped into a culture again of impunity, of corruption, of collusion, because they are the leaders of tomorrow. If they are the leaders of tomorrow and they learn the wrong values and cultures, then our nation is doomed. So we need to ensure that as we speak of setting the right tone, we make sure that the student and the young people that we put into the system, especially in the public sector, because today I want to talk about the public sector, they enter into the space that is being cleaned up. Otherwise, the infection just goes on and on and on. And we acknowledge that it's not going to be an easy one. But one of the audience members spoke about the nexus between public servants and public representatives. Spot on. Because you see, Mfundis, you go to municipalities and you hear so much was unspent. You go to our provincial departments and national ones for that matter. You hear so much was unspent. And when you try to delve into why it was not spent, now let's put it on procurement one side and on recruitment one side. You hear it was not spent because the comrades could not agree on who must get this tender. And therefore council was collapsed, a council meeting was collapsed. These are the realities. And then the time is ticking and the financial year closes and the budget must go back. And people are in poverty, there are no services delivered, there's youth unemployment, and millions are returned to Pretoria because comrades could not agree on who to give it to. Very, very, very discouraging and shameful. Similarly, on the space of employment, you go and look at the number of unfilled vacancies and how much, therefore, the savings were derived from that. And some of these unfilled vacancies are so critical that service delivery is hampered by them remaining vacant. But when you delve deeper again, why were they unfilled? It is because Councillor X, who is a member or an MMC, is pushing this candidate, and the director in corporate services is pushing this candidate, and there's a deadlock and the process was collapsed. That word collapsed is being used so heavily in such processes. And people say we're going to collapse it intentionally. Now, if we are serious about taking the country forward, especially in this new administration, we need to dismantle that nexus. Public representatives must do their part. Public servants must implement. The nexus between them, if it is not healthy, it needs to be dismantled. Roles, functions, and responsibilities must be re-emphasized so that we move away from this kind of unhealthy nexus. Now, someone talked about follow-ups. You know, these lectures being made and the declarations being made and national dialogue being called upon, and there's no follow-up. It stems precisely from that culture of APPs in government, annual performance plans. What we do, we put in the APP. I shall convene a national dialogue. And if that happens, I get a 5 out of 5. And I get my bonus. What that national dialogue leads to is not my indaba. I will plan for it in the next APP. Now, across the board, that is talking about when you say there are no follow-ups. Think about the issue of lifestyle audit. How many of our presidents have spoken about it? And you know, obviously, that it touches on the untouchable. But for government to instill that confidence in the people so that people can trust government, we need to be seen to be starting to act on the issue of lifestyle audits. Because it is just completely an eyesore for people who wake up in the morning and go to Home Affairs, for example, and help people with getting their passports and IDs. Completely commit people in those long queues. And they still get their full salary at the end of the month. But on the next cubicle, there is someone who does very little, secret meetings, and at the end, we are at the same grade, but this lady or gentleman is having unspeakable wealth as a public servant. How do we explain that? And there's only one thing that can help us explain it. The lifestyle audits, why are they taking so long to happen? This is exactly what you are saying. I don't remember your name, sir, from the audience. Follow-ups on some of these things. The crucial ones, as an example, being this matter of lifestyle audit. So, program director, I can go on and on about some of these things because I feel quite strongly about. I have just recently spoken out very, very spiritedly about the issue of deployment of capable people in positions that must enhance, 1, service delivery, 2, accountability. That is now appointing people to do the work as operational people and appointing people to provide oversight as board members. I argued quite strongly. It needs to be done meritoriously. And it takes us back to the issue of cadre deployment. And I have said quite strongly that I do not have a problem with cadre deployment. In fact, I believe cadre deployment is used all over the world. It's just not been called that. But if you follow the countries that use cadre deployment, you will see that even in their Lutuli houses, for example, it's not only about the cadre, it's about the profile of the cadre to be deployed. I made an example of China as a very progressive country, where all the heads of public entities are subjected to serious competition. And after that, the Communist Party comes in to make a final determination. Not before, after. And once they get a list, they then say, but who's the best here? Based on the requirements of the job. And they put a stamp and they deploy. And they monitor We don't just put you there and hope that you will give us more tenders and favors, curry favors. We put you there to make us proud through your delivery. So the cadre deployment process is not a wrong concept, but it's being implemented very wrongly. Because it enables a school teacher to become a municipal manager. That's what it does. Now, municipal managers are expected to deliver high quality work in planning, organizing, delivery, monitoring and evaluation. As a school teacher, with all due respect to teachers that made me, their expertise are to teach. And those that make it to the head of department begin to be trained in leadership. And those who become principals then are further trained in leadership and management and administration. Now you can't be picked from a teacher and be deployed as a municipal manager. We are openly declaring a downfall of that municipality. And therefore, that's part of the moral regeneration. These are things we know, Mfundis. The Bible says in the book of Joel, I wish dinganikhumbuza ezi zinto nangona nizazi. I wish to remind you, brethren, of these things, even though you know. We know these things. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. We must have the will to implement these things that we know. We must have the will to implement the good policies that we have. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here again years to come. Siyabonga, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Jobeka. We really appreciate your time. We are quite thankful and grateful that we have to feed from such a great mind, such as yours. I would like to request Ntate Khwele just to come and close this part 1 of the program and just summarize part 2 and also just make a vote of thanks for this session. Rakwele.
Thank you very much, Retsepiso, for always doing a sterling job. We cannot say enough that we have had the best of the province talking to us on issues of morality. I think I see Father Mkachwa shaking his head in agreement that is the type of leader that South Africa requires. We as the moral generation are excited that the university is beginning to say to us that we need to strengthen the partnership. We are found limping because those who must support us will not support us because we are raising issues that they do not like to hear. So on that note, we want to really appreciate the quality of the input that you made, the passion with which you raised the issues. To us, it is sending a clear message that in the Northwest University, we have leadership, ethical leadership that can align and actually hold our hand as the moral regeneration movement. We'll continue to advocate for promotion of the Charter of Positive Values that seeks to get a change in the culture. The public service culture is not encouraging. It is not saying that people on a daily basis are involved in the business of service delivery. It says people on a daily basis are after their own interests. And we really want to appreciate the fact that most of those who spoke here today, Prof, are actually your alumni. I'm talking about Orapele Matshidiso, who's the former president of the SRC, Northwest-University 2012 to 2013. He was there when Father Smangaliso, when we had the partnership with Sowetan, with Mpumelelo Mkabela, when you were there with Professor, if I still remember, he starts with an S, Swanepoel. Yes, Swanepoel it was. Yes, it's Professor Swanepoel. And Tsepo Mokuruani, former deputy president of the SRC as well, 2012 to 2013. And Mpoletsang Muntsiwa, former president of the SRC, 2013-2014. This really says those are the young people who are articulating issues there, that the university did quality work. It really prepared them for the role that they are playing in society. And the fact that they had to travel out of town to be here today, after one was graduating, I think Matsiris was graduating at the University of Joburg, but came all the way to be part of this. It really says that we have committed people in this province that can assist, drive the moral regeneration agenda. But also appreciating that Father Mangaliso Mkachwa came all the way from Johannesburg with Ntate, he's from Pretoria, but he came all the way with Reverend Tami Mvambo, the national coordinator, also from the Northwest. So they've got a history of moral regeneration and the Northwest. So Prof. Paho, we really appreciate your involvement in this project. We know that among your academia, we've got Professor Gilbert Mutsa-Tebe, who's also a member of the moral regeneration movement, since we nominated him after we were constituted. We know that he said from the airport, he's driving very fast here to be part of us. He was in Venezuela, making very good input on behalf of the university there as well. So we appreciate that you are internationalists. You are impacting the world. If you look at the CV also of Prof as well as Prof, I'm saying the Vice Chancellor, as well as your professorship, it suggests that we do have the people that we need as the moral generation to make a difference in our communities. And for that, we are absolutely very excited at the partnership that is beginning to take root. So, Prof, we are hoping that we will be engaging with you further on our next engagement, which we want to take into rural communities as well. But in August, we're also raising or responding to the gender-based violence as it relates to women, particularly mining communities. I'm already announcing, Father Mkasho, that we have a partnership with the Treatment Action Group and other municipality, Madibeng municipality, for us to launch the He for She engagement in the mining community the second week of August. So it is those particular engagement that we're looking at, that we want to strengthen partnerships with civil society, and we've seen young people here coming out in to represent others who are not here. We specifically recognize the partnership and the involvement of the ladies who are angels of tomorrow, who are part of this engagement. We know that the others are watching online, but it is, and as far as members of the Moral Generation Interim Committee, also watching from Mamusa, as well as watching from Madibeng, watching also from Khanyisa and other parts of the province. So we are excited. We didn't bring them over, but they are watching. We also appreciate the response of the public service and the provincial legislature as I've seen that the Prof had engaged the speaker as well. So there are many people out there that are following this. Even nationally, other provinces were following this particular input. So on that score, we wish to request the representative of the executive mayor of Mahikeng to come and say a word or two as a vote of thanks. We have adjusted our program so that he does that, because we no longer proceeding with the second part of the program, because we wanted to launch a structure here with full participation of the people. But we will engage informally, recognizing the people who really made it here, so that we can as well involve them in one way or the other, because they are part of the solution. Thank you very much, Remuseu, for a wonderful job done. MMC Billy Daniels, please come to the floor to say a vote of thanks on behalf of the Executive Mayor, Councillor Tshepiso Mphehlo.
No, thank you, Pastor Kwele. Good morning, everyone. Please allow me to, first of all, express these apologies from the Executive Mayor of Mahikeng, as well as the single whip of Council, Chief Whip Manametsi Moeti. They could not be here because they are currently in council sitting. Honorable Premier Lazarus Mokhosi, Madam Speaker, honorable members of Provincial Legislature, executive mayors and mayors of Northwest Province, Professor Bismarck Theo Becker, faith-based organizations, panel members, members of the media, community members, viewers on social media, esteemed guests. Please allow me to extend a heartfelt and profound thanks to all of you who have decided that you would be using our great city to launch this program, to have the annual Nelson Mandela Memorial Lecture, as well as the launch of the Moral Regeneration Movement, the Mahikeng chapter, which, as Pastor Kwele has said, would be moved to a new date, which will be communicated to everyone. And to this structure, that indeed we in Mahikeng, we need this as leaders, where we are being guided by our faith-based organizations, our pastors, our bishops, where we should be giving and leading as examples of our communities a new and moral stand-up persons. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Premier, I do not want to take up too much of your time, but I wish to leave all of us with this message, which comes from 2 Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name, humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. God bless Mafeking. God bless the Northwest Province. God bless South Africa. God bless all our leaders. I thank you.